Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar for mature job seekers on how to make your experience count. Before we get started, just want to check that everybody can hear or view this webinar okay. So if you're having any issues, please click on the red Live Event Tech Support button below and the team will try to help you. Okay, so just to start by introducing ourselves, my name's Charlotte Valanotti. I'm the Head of Marketing for Fish for Jobs, and I'm joined by the lovely Tricia Phillips.
Hi, I'm Tricia Phillips, the Careers Editor on the Daily Mirror newspaper.
Okay, so that's introductions done. The format of today's webinar is going to talk a little bit about the current market, thinking positively, and how to sell yourself on paper, in person, and online. We've got a host of resources that are available for you to download, and then we're going to move on to the live Q&A. If you haven't already, please submit questions using the Ask a Question tab below the screen. We will try to answer as many as we can today, but if we do run out of time, don't worry, we'll come back to each of you directly via your email, so please include an email address. So a bit about the current market. The job market is picking up, but still skilled people of all ages are finding it hard to get a job. It's easy to say this, but thinking positively is a start. Try not to focus on your age as a factor holding you back. Instead, focusing on what's going to push you forward. Experienced or older isn't negative when it refers to your experience or level rather than your age.
More than ever, it's about picking the right jobs, i.e. the ones that you're most likely to get. And that means doing a little bit of research on employers, those that are more amiable to taking on older workers. There's quite a lot of big companies who've got big workforces who do take on a lot of people near retirement age, post-retirement age, big names like Marks & Spencer's, B&Q, there's loads of them. And so you're better off heading to those sort of employers rather than having, a totally negative experience.
Definitely. Okay, so how do you sell yourself on paper? And by that we're really meaning your CV and any cover letters you may write. So firstly, does your CV pass the 6-second test? What do we mean by that? Well, they used to say that recruiters would spend on average 30 seconds reading your CV. Well, actually now it's more like 6 seconds. What they're referring to really is the amount of time they skim read your CV before they decide whether to read it in detail. I don't know, Tricia, is this something you're hearing from employers and recruiters?
I hear from probably the majority of recruiters saying that they possibly get 200-300, even more CVs for every job, and they literally might have 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes maximum to sift through them in the beginning to bring themselves to a shortlist, to bring in for interview. So you really have to make your CV count. You really have to make sure that you get their attention very quickly, or you really will end up on that reject pile.
Okay, so how do you do this? It's really important to remember that it's your CV. You decide what you include and what you leave off. And when you're more experienced, it is hard to produce a CV when you've got so much you could include. But remember, you don't need to include everything. Think about quality and relevance rather than quantity. So on that note, Tricia, what would you say the biggest CV don'ts are?
For older workers especially, I would say revealing your age on the CV is the biggest no-no. You don't want to not have the chance of getting to an interview and showing them how brilliant you are, no matter what your age is. So that would be my key tip for this area. And basically, you don't need to include any unnecessary personal data. Apart from your date of birth, you don't need to put your marital status, whether you've got children, your national insurance number, your gender, basically any personal details that aren't relevant to you being able to do this job.
What about, your work history, because you might have a lot of it. How far back would you recommend going?
I'd recommend going back no further than 10 to 15 years maximum. You've got to remember that when you're going for a job, employers are more interested in what you've just done than what you did 20, 30 years ago possibly, and also they want to know that you've got up-to-date skills and experience rather than, say computer skills that may be out of date, or no computer skills, which would be which wouldn't help you get a job, would they?
No. And I think this is important for everyone, not just the mature job seekers. I remember when I'd been working for about 10 years, and I started to find it really hard to fit everything on my CV. And in the end, I think I left off the first 2 jobs because I've always worked in the same field. I'd gone on to be a manager, then a head of. They didn't seem relevant. Would there be any exceptions to this, though, Tricia?
The exceptions to this would be, say you've had different career paths and you'll possibly want to go back into a career path that you had in a former life. Then you might want to bring in some information about past jobs you've had because they are relevant to the job that you're going for at the moment. So you might want to, make a nod to the fact that you have got experience in this area, you really loved it, and you really want to get back into that area.
Okay. And what about gaps in your CV? I know you've got strong feelings about those.
Well, the thing is, if you leave gaps on your CV, then you leave employers thinking, what were they up to during those gaps? And believe me, they're not going to think good things. They're not going to assume you were doing some voluntary work or you were doing some nice caring for a family relative. They're going to probably think you were doing something a bit more dodgy than that.
Or nothing.
Or nothing at all. Yeah, or just sat surface surfing for years or months. So really, you need to fill these gaps with something. And, you could have been bringing up children. That's perfectly acceptable. You could have been caring for a relative. You may have taken a career break, gone travelling. So, just fill those gaps with something, even if you have to stretch dates for jobs. As in, there was a couple of months between finishing one job and applying for this one. You were possibly being paid for a couple of months after you finished work. So, in theory, you were still on the payroll for those extra 2 or 3 months. So, you just need to be a bit clever.
Yeah, and you also don't need to list reasons for leaving your job.
No.
I know sometimes application forms, they might ask you for that, and then you have to. But, you just want it to be a nice, seamless, chronological flow, one job to the next, or if there's a gap, explaining why. Okay, so those are the CV don'ts. What about the CV do's? What should you put on your CV, or what should you do?
The basics for this are no longer than 2 pages. I know it's difficult when you're a bit older and you've had lots of experience and you want to tell them how brilliant you are, but you only don't tell them how brilliant you are at things that are relevant to this job. The relevance word keeps coming up, doesn't it?
It does.
We're going to have to print this
broken record, aren't we?
Yeah. So you need to think about what experience you've got, out of all of that lovely experience, what is relevant to this job, what matches to the job description. It's easy to get a bit carried away and think you need to tell them every minute detail of every bit you did for every job, but you don't. You just have to be very smart and include things that are going to catch their attention and make them believe that you are the right person for this role.
Yeah, and try to list recent achievements as well. So this could be job-related or it could be skills and an experience that you want to highlight. And when you're listing out your job, the most recent one, you write a bit more about, and then you scale back as you go back. So that's another way to keep it to 2 pages.
Yeah.
Because they're most interested in what you've just done, probably in the last 5 to 10 years.
The other thing is target employers, as we mentioned earlier briefly. As I said, larger companies, do have bigger quotas of workers, so they can actually have a better age range in there. And there are companies that really are pro older workers. They like having a balance in the workplace. So if you go for them in the first place, then you've got actually a higher chance of getting the job anyway. So it saves a lot of disappointment, doesn't it?
And what about tailoring your CV? I know it sounds like a lot of work. How would you recommend job seekers go about doing this?
I would recommend having a big master CV. There you go. Have a master CV with everything on it, all the things you want to tell everybody. And then what you do is you adapt that for every job. You tailor it. You take out bits that are not relevant to that job. You put bits that are very relevant to that job nearer the top. You change your personal statement. You need to tweak that really for every job to make it look like you're applying for that job rather than just any job.
Yeah. So that sounds like a lot of work. But it really isn't if you have that master one, and once you start doing it, you realise the bits you need to tweak, and it really does make a difference. I know when I receive a CV, and I tell it's just a standard one, as opposed to one that they've really understood the job description and tried to match it.
It also looks like you're a bit sloppy as well. It gives out the impression that you're not really bothered. So if you're not even bothered about sending a CV that's relevant, then why would you be bothered about doing the job? So you want to give them the best impression of you from the very start, don't you?
And we often get asked, is there a perfect way of structuring your CV or presenting your CV? And I think the honest answer is no. It's very different people like different things. However, there are some key elements that we recommend you include on your CV that you can see on the screen there. And just to draw your attention to two resources that you can download that will help you when writing your CV. Underneath the screen in the resources tab, we've got some CV advice for mature job seekers and also a CV template you can use in a Word document. But just briefly, your CV should include your contact details, an email address and mobile number. Definitely your personal statement, your key achievements and skills, and as I said, keeping them recent, your work history, probably going back 10, max 15 years, your education, hobbies and interests. This is an interesting one because I know that when I left university it was all about, putting lots of hobbies and interests in, but actually nowadays, unless they're really relevant or demonstrate a particular skill, maybe public speaking or drama or something like that, I would just say keep this section to a minimum. And references, unless they ask you specifically for references, just put references available upon request. That will also save you space on your CV. Okay, so cover letters. I mean, Tricia, what do you think? They're a lot of work. You spend days in your CV. Should you invest the time in writing a cover letter?
They do seem like just another chore when you're applying for a job, don't they? They are a bit of a pain, but these days, because not many people include them with their job applications, it could be one way that people can stand out from the crowd. And they are useful. They do serve a use, as in they give people a reason to read your CV.
Definitely, and I think so much of applying for jobs now happens online that it's probably going to be a cover email as well, so it's less effort than writing a letter.
Right.
But do keep the language professional. We've got some top tips on screen there, but keep it professional. Remember to include your contact details, and just to make things easier for you, we've actually got a cover letter template in the resources section as well, so you can just make sure you include all the main things.
The only thing I would say on this one is just to keep it short, because obviously you're giving them another 2-page document to read after this, so you don't want to make it like a full-page essay, more of a couple of short paragraphs. Would you agree on that?
Oh yeah, definitely. Okay, so that's selling yourself on paper, that's your CV and your cover letter. Once you've nailed this and you've got through to the all-important interview stage, how do you sell yourself in person? So Tricia, what would be your top tips for interviews?
Top tips for interviews would be to, and especially for older workers, would be to use your experience to your advantage. Emphasise that your experience means that you can hit the ground running. You're not going to have to be trained for months on end. That you can actually do the job already, which is a great selling point. They take on a lot of younger people who actually then prove 3 months later that they can't do the job, but you can actually do it. So
but
that's great.
Not work ready, are they?
They're not. No, exactly. They haven't had the right training, or they haven't got the right frame of mind yet to get into work and get up every morning to do it. We've mentioned this earlier about focusing on your recent achievements. If you're in the interview, make sure that you chat about things. If you ask any questions, make sure that you give them examples of things you've done recently, not things from 20 years in the past, because recent things are going to mean that you're up to date with everything and that you can work in today's workplace.
Definitely, and emphasising your ability to learn new skills is really important as well. And this could be in the work environment or outside of it. And emphasising your ability to adapt to new situations and in particular new technologies. I know there's a stereotype, that when you get past a certain age you can't keep up to date with new technology, so I would bring that in wherever you can. And again, this could have been at work or could have been stuff that you taught yourself at home or a course you've been on.
Yeah, the other thing is, especially if you're possibly going to be working for a younger boss, is to make sure, let them know that you can accept and you're happy to accept authority from someone a bit younger than you. It might be worth here, if you have worked for a younger boss before, just say, I've always had younger bosses, or my last boss was 10 years younger, but we got on really well. They showed me some new things, I showed them some old things that worked. You can make it work to your advantage, can't you, with that?
Definitely, and also, obviously, being a bit more of mature experience means, emphasising you're more reliable. You're not going to be...
You've got to be partying every night. You're not going to be turning up late for work. You can manage to get out of bed on time every day and give a little bit extra time for traffic problems. You've done it a long time, so you're not going to have all of those excuses that a lot of young people have in the workplace today.
Definitely. And finally, avoid mentioning things that will reveal your age. Don't mention your grandchildren or anything else that gives away your age. And just focusing on recent experience and examples. It's not to say you're hiding these things. It's just you're keeping it focused on the job you're applying for and why you're the right candidate.
And also you can then let your co-workers know a little bit more about your situation. Once you've landed the job, you can talk about your grandchildren and your interests outside and other jobs you've done in past lives and things. So it is just keeping it very up-to-date and relevant. I know we keep saying that word and we're like a broken record, but it is really important. It's one of the key words to remember when you're doing job applications.
We often get asked, how can I prepare for interviews? What are the common questions I'm going to get asked? And really, you can't predict this. Every interview I've been to is different. However, they normally are some common themes or questions that come out, and when we pull them together for you, again, more information can be found in the resources section below. But Tricia, do you want to kick off with some of the common interview questions?
The one that most interviewers will ask you in some shape or form is to tell them about yourself. The big thing here is to avoid the temptation to tell them your entire life story, when you were born and how you went to school. What they really want to know is they want to know a little bit about your work history and your work experience. So you just need to have a bit like you do your personal statement on your CV. That's a little bit, the answer to this question is going to be similar to that. Possibly if you're changing job or you're coming into a new career, you might want to explain that you've just retrained. You might want to just tell them a little bit about, it's basically letting them know that you're relevant, that you're the right person for this job.
Yeah, definitely. I think this question often comes at the beginning of the interview as well, so it's really important that you prepared and practiced it. Otherwise, it can just go downhill from there. It can just start to unravel. So, yeah, look at your personal statement in your CV, practice saying it out loud, practice saying it with a family member or a friend if you can, just so you nail that one and you feel confident going forward. When you get to these next questions, which another common one would be, why should we hire you? They might not ask you this directly, but it would be in there somewhere. They might ask, why did you apply for this role? Why are you the right person for this role? And Tricia, how would you handle this question?
You need to basically just try and match your skills and your experience to what they're looking for. Think back to the job advertisement, what they were asking for and what skills they were asking for, and then you can explain to them why they should hire you, basically.
Great. And the next question, what are your weaknesses? Again, they probably won't ask you that directly, but they might hone in on an area where you're lacking skills or experience, or they might ask you about a situation, challenging situation, something like that. They're sort of trying to see, weaknesses, but also just sort of how you cope with them and how you respond to challenging situations. Tricia, over to you again, because it's really hard.
None of us are perfect, and everybody knows that, but what you need to do here, the secret is to focus on something tiny, some little thing. It might be the fact that you've got training up to a certain level and you possibly think you might need a little bit more training in that area just to take you on to like an advanced level. It might be the fact that there was a job in the past where you possibly thought that you were lacking in something, but how you overcame that and how you managed to maybe possibly train yourself up. So showing that you're adaptable is a good one for this question, isn't it? And keep it tiny, I think, is the
not one of the main things they're looking for.
No. Don't highlight any really big weaknesses that you've got, basically.
Yeah. And then the next one, and I think this is really, really important, is why do you want this job? So important to demonstrate enthusiasm for the job. I don't know if you've ever got any feedback from employers on this sort of area.
Well, Charlotte, loads of employers report back on this one. It's probably the key thing from most interviews where they say they get to the end of the interview and they haven't got a clue whether the person they've interviewed wants the job because they don't give them any indication that they're interested. They don't say anything to say, I like the sound of this job, I'd really like this job. Make sure you finish your interview and you've said that you really want the job if you do really want it.
Yeah, definitely, because you might have the right skills and experience, but if the employer thinks you don't really want it and you'll probably leave after 6 months, a year, they're not going to hire you because, they don't really start recouping their investment in you and your training until you've probably been in the job for 6 to 9 months. So, make sure you demonstrate enthusiasm. And if they don't ask you why you want it, just make sure you tell them.
Make sure you tell them yourself, definitely.
Somehow. And then the last question, which is the trick one, give me an example of when you. we don't know what they're going to ask you here, but it's a really good idea to have examples prepared. And what I mean by that is look through what they're asking for in the job description. There's normally some bullet points. And try to think of an example of where you've done that or skills and experience in that area. And have a few prepared because you might use them up in other questions.
This could be an example of, I don't know, think of somebody in, say, hospitality, and they were organising an event, and possibly one of the suppliers let them down on the day, and you could say, but I managed to find a new supplier really quick. I bribed them to get the stuff to me. The event went ahead. It was planned. It was fine. We overcame it. Just to let them know that you're not a panicker, that you can cope if there's a bit of stress or something goes wrong. As we all know, everything isn't smooth sailing in the workplace every day. So it's just letting them know that you don't flap, you don't panic, you're quite calm, you can get on with things. Problems occur, but you don't have to cope with them.
And I think these examples, these are stories really, and these are things that bring the interviews to life, and they're going to remember about you. They're going to, oh yeah, that was the one that said she did this or did that. And it's a chance to really let your personality and your skills shine through. Okay, so following up after interviews, I'm going to be honest, I have to admit I've never done this before. I've never sent a follow-up email or letter. However, I've been really impressed when people do. So what do you think of that, Tricia?
Again, very, very few people do it, like yourself, Charlotte.
Yes.
But I think it's actually really for yourself as well. It's a really useful exercise. And also, if you do that, they may have had, say, 2 candidates that they were really humming and hawing over, not sure which one to give the job to. And if they know that you're genuinely interested, they could keep you in mind for another job, one that comes up potentially in the future.
Definitely. Demonstrate your enthusiasm. You can reiterate why you're perfect for the role. And also, you can repeat back what they discussed. So what I mean by that is they might have told you about a new project or a new site that's open or something, and you can say, I was really excited or interested to hear about X. It shows you've listened and you've digested and you've taken on board what they've said. So, though I've never done it, I would definitely recommend it, and I will be doing it in the future. Okay, so the final section of how to sell yourself is how to sell yourself online. So what do we mean by this? Well, before we get into how you can use social media and different online platforms to promote yourself to employers, I just want to talk a little bit about your online presence, and in particular, making sure that everything a potential employer can find out about you online positions you as the right candidate for the job. Now, how do you do this? Well, the very simple way is actually just to Google yourself. So go onto Google and type in your name, so Charlotte Valenotti, and then look in the search results and see if there's anything in there that you don't want an employer seeing. Any photos or...
And you know that something like 80%, I reckon the figure's probably higher, of employers are going to do exactly that before they bring you in for an interview. So it's a good little exercise for everybody to do.
Definitely. And make sure you're keeping good company. So if if you've got friends that are tagging you in photos you don't want employers to see, make sure that you update your settings so they can't. Or you make everything private, making sure the people, the organizations that you're connected to reflect well on you. And make sure you have professional email addresses or handles, for example, if you're on Twitter. Things like Party Girl at Club Life can really crush your credibility. So you might want to set up, a professional email address just for your job hunt, which first name, surname is normally a good way to go.
That's really useful because I have spoken to employers who have actually literally been put off somebody because they had a dodgy sounding email address. Definitely.
And avoid putting your year of birth in your email address. This happens a lot, when it used to happen a lot, especially if you couldn't get your name. So, Charlotte Valenotti, 1976 at yahoo.co.uk, for example. If you can't get your name, don't put your year of birth and just put something else in. So once you've cleaned everything up and you're thinking you're looking good from an online point of view, how do you make sure that, how do you monitor this? And a really easy way is to set up Google alerts. These are email alerts, and they're free, but they allow you to keep tabs on your online presence. Because basically, every time your name pops up on a website, they send you an email with a link to where your name appears. So you can go and you can check. You'll be like, nah, take that down, or whatever.
It's also maybe talking to friends as well if you're applying for jobs, just asking them not to tag you in photos of you looking very drunk and partying just for a while, especially before you get the job.
Definitely.
Once you get the job, possibly.
And then, so you've cleaned up everything. How do you use social media to your advantage? What advice would you give mature job seekers, Tricia?
It's basically to connect you to all the opportunities out there. So things like LinkedIn, great to have a LinkedIn profile, very professional. It does focus all on your work life and about your achievements, so you can really blow your trumpet on LinkedIn, and you can post things there, and you can get involved in groups that are relevant, and you never know where the contacts are going to come from. It's a brilliant networking site as well. And it's not like your Facebook, which is great for all your friends and everything like that, but LinkedIn is a proper professional network to use, isn't it?
Definitely, and it's good also to, if you're being interviewed by someone, to look them up on LinkedIn first, because then you can, sometimes you don't know what their job title is, you don't know what their kind of angle is going to be. So you can look them up, you can see what they do, what they've done before, and then you can try and maybe make links to them. I know that you used to work here or whatever, and it's just try and connect yourself.
Or there may be something that they post on there, so if you are going for an interview, that you can actually talk about in the interview, saying, oh, I thought you were interested in this is one of my passions too, what do you think about whatever. It just gives you an icebreaker for an interview as well.
Yeah, and it's not stalkerish because LinkedIn is a professional network. If you start going through their Facebook photos, that might be a step too far. And what about stuff like blogging? What do you think of that?
Blogging's great. A lot of people have really hit themselves and put themselves out there in cyberspace and in the real world through blogs. They've started just a passion, but I think people just need to be wary that they keep them sort of to the area that they're going for jobs in. If that's if they're going to use them, they're going to promote them, and they just need to be careful that they don't associate themselves with, like you said earlier, any groups, or they don't come across as some campaigning nut or something who might, they might put people off taking you on. So yes, you can have passions and you can have beliefs, but you just need to be careful about what you're saying, especially when you're applying for jobs. People will definitely look everything up about you online, and any little thing could just stop you getting an interview in the job.
Yeah, and finally, Twitter. You can learn a lot about a company by following them on Twitter. So another great resource to use. And if you're active on Twitter, the same rules apply. Make sure professional handle and that you're keeping it clean, should we say?
Be wary of retweeting things, that are political and other things, and also just don't get into spats on Twitter. If someone sends something to you, don't have to reply to it.
Okay, so let's talk a bit about the hidden job market now. And what does this mean? Well, it's been estimated that about 70% of jobs aren't advertised. So you've got your published job listings and then this big hidden job market underneath. So if they're not advertised, how are recruiters and employers finding people? Well, employers use recruitment agencies, so agencies such as Reed or Manpower, or their own networks to find the right candidates. So how do you get on their radar? Well, recruitment agencies use CV databases like the one on Fish for Jobs to proactively source candidates. So how do you make sure your CV gets found by them? Well, firstly, you need to upload your CV to job sites like Fish for Jobs, and make sure you select the option to allow recruiters to see your profile and CV. You've got the option to keep your profile and CV hidden if you wish to, or you've got the option to make it visible. So once it's visible, recruiters will then search for candidates using keywords, much like we search for things on Google. So make sure you include the right keywords on your CV. We're not talking about spamming your CV full of keywords. They've got to appear naturally. But say, for example, if your job title is project coordinator, maybe you want to also include the terms project manager or project managed on your CV, because they might search for those search terms. And finally, if you are actively job hunting, keep your CV fresh. What we mean by that is maybe you upload a new version every week or so. The reason being is that recruitment agencies, they want to source candidates that are actively job hunting. And when they search for CVs that have been uploaded most recently will appear at the top of the list. So if you imagine they might get 200 results. If your CV is a month old, it's going to be further down the list. So keep it updated regularly. Okay, so now moving on to the live Q&A.
Hi everybody, Tricia here. Thanks Charlotte, that was great. I hope everybody found that really useful. And thanks to everybody who's joined our webinar. I'll do my best to get through as many of your questions as possible. I'm going to kick it off with a question from Steve. Hi Steve. Steve said he's 55, he hasn't worked for 5 years. And he says no matter how hard he tries to fill the gaps with either voluntary work or consultancy work or self-employment, recruiters don't seem to invite him for interviews. He wants to know what he can do to attract them positively. Well, Steve, you need to make sure that you're spelling out that your skills are up to date, because if you've been out of the workplace for 5 years, things have moved on quite swiftly since then. It may be that your CV is reading a little bit like you're just trying to fill the gap, and that, you know, have you done useful things that have enhanced your skills and your experience? Make sure that you include them. Think about the things that you're filling your CV with, what they're saying to the employer. Employers know a lot of people have lost their jobs over the past few years, but they know that's a sign of the tough times. It's not the individual, so they won't be judging you harshly on that. But just make sure, Steve, that you're selling yourself the best you can. Don't make it look, as I said, that you're just filling in those gaps. Make them work for you. Hi, Ian. Ian feels like the uni skills are holding him back, especially in IT. He feels a bit embarrassed about asking about courses on Word and Excel. He's just wondering how he should go about asking employers. Well, Ian, I think you've sort of answered your question yourself. I'd say you need to get those skills up to date yourself before going for jobs, because if you think that's holding you back, then you can actually address this. If you're unemployed at the moment, there may be some government help that you can get to brush up on your skills, or you can find out about courses and say in an interview that you're currently studying to update your knowledge. If these skills are important to your job prospects, then basically you need to do something about it. You're in control of that. Also, just to let you know, there's a new courses section that's on the Fish for Jobs website. Have a look in there and just see if there's anything you can get. You might pick up some useful tips and advice there. Hi to Sharon. She's been told not to include her date of birth on her CV and wants to know why. Sharon, legally, firms are not allowed to ask your age. That's the first thing. Also, if you're an older job seeker, you don't really want to let firms discriminate against you because of your age. Your CV basically is to get you the interview, and it's the skills and experience that are going to sell you to a potential boss. You don't want to be stopped at the first hurdle, because when you put your CV, you put your date of birth on there, then they know exactly how old you are, and if they are sort of veering towards being a bit ageist, then you're not even going to get to the interview. You need to get to that interview, show them how amazing you are, and that you are the right person for the job. Just to remind everybody that there's lots of resources available on the Fish for Jobs website, the CV templates, specific ones for older workers as well. There's some tips and advice. Make sure you use them because they are free, so they're not going to cost you anything. Hi to Karen. Karen's asking if social media is important to her job search. She said surely it's social, not professional media, which is true, Karen, but the lines are blurring these days. Depending on your chosen career, social media could be a vital skill. It's become an important part of lots of jobs. That's why also it's vital to keep an eye on your profiles and be careful about what you post to ensure it's not putting potential bosses off. You may think it's just your friends and a few colleagues who are looking at your Facebook and your Twitter, but 80% of bosses are going to check out your profiles potentially before you go in for an interview, definitely before they take you on for a job. LinkedIn as well is brilliant. It can be a great way to find out about networks, people who could lead you to your next dream job. It could be a way to promote yourself professionally. But as I say, you need to know the sort of difference between social and professional. Think about your what pictures you post, things like that, because a lot of people have been turned down for jobs or haven't got as far as interviews just because of what they have on social media. But the other side of that is that it can actually help you in the job search, definitely. Hi, Pete. Pete said he hasn't created a CV for a few years. He's wondering if he should include details of references on it, or whether he should include this in his covering letter. The big answer is no. References should always be available on request, and that should be the sort of final line on your CV. Firstly, you need to be careful of putting someone else's details on your CV. It's not a private document. You post these online, they get left on people's desks. there's a data protection issue there, but also references really only come into play when an employer is ready to offer you a job, and that's when you can give them details of the people that can contact. You just need to let them know that you do have some available. Hi Susie, welcome to the webinar. You want to know how to catch the eye of a potential employer with your personal statement. Okay, this is one of the most vital bits on your CV. You've got about 30 seconds to bag the attention of a boss or a potential boss with your statement. And this is the bit where you need to summarise why you are the right person for this job. This is in capital letters, not just any job. You need to give them a little bit of an idea about who you are and what business you're in. I've seen some horror CVs where I've read the whole CV and by the end of it I still don't know what industry this person's in, whether they're in accounts or they're an electrician or whether they're a beautician. So you have to imagine being an employee with a pile of CVs. You have to turn into a shortlist for interview. You have to get through them quickly and efficiently. You haven't got time to read every single word, so you want all the key information at the top. And by at the top means your personal statement. Go over the job description or the advertisement that you see and match your skills and experience to that, so the employer has no doubt that you're the right person for the job, but avoid using buzzwords. You can include some keywords which they include in the job description, but don't go for buzzwords that don't actually mean anything at all. They're just a waste of space. Hi Beth. Beth said her hobbies are a little old-fashioned. She's wondering whether she should include them on a CV. Beth, I would leave them off. Firstly, they'll give away your age, and you don't want to be put on the reject pile just because you're potentially a little bit older. And certainly not before you've had the chance to wow a potential boss at an interview. If they're not relevant to the role you're applying for, then they're not helping you to land an interview. Remember, your CV is only there to serve one purpose, to get you to that interview so you can shine and impress bosses. I always advise people to only include hobbies that add an extra element to their application that may help them stand out. So, say you're a sporty person, you enjoy sporting activities, and you're applying for a job with a sports organisation, I don't know, Virgin Active or one of the sports clubs out there, then yes, they could be very relevant and they could give you that little edge against others applying for the job. But other than that, really, the fact that you like knitting and socialising and things like that aren't going to add a lot to your application. And if you do put things like socialising, a boss is going to read between the lines and think, oh dear, big problem. So just think about whatever you put on your CV, think about what message that's conveying to a boss. There's a key word that I sort of seem to get stuck with and people think I'm sort of broken record. It's the word relevant. So if something is not relevant to the job that you're applying for, then actually leave it off your CV. You don't have to put everything on there. Hello to Gary. Gary said he's looking for a promotion. He wants to know how to stay ahead of the younger curve, so to speak. Well, Gary, basically, make sure you keep up to date with what's happening within the firm that you're working for, if that's where you want the promotion, or the industry that you work in. Keep your skills up to date. Keep an eye on what those younger ones are doing, so that you know what competition you've got when you're going for new jobs or a promotion, and you know what direction you may need to head in. Don't think of your age as a barrier. You've got loads to offer. A calm, experienced hand. You can hit the ground running. You don't need babysitting. You've been there, you've done it, you've got the T-shirt, and you've got proof of what you've achieved. Younger people won't have this, so sometimes your age is a good plus. Just to remind people, don't forget, as well as this webinar, there's loads of resources available on the Fish for Jobs website, templates, tips, advice. Use them, they're free. Hi to Ben. Ben wants to know how Brexit will affect the jobs market for mature job seekers. Well, Ben, if I had a crystal ball, I would know the answer to this. And a lot of people would love to know this, but actually nobody does know. We haven't actually left the EU yet. And all that's going on at the moment is lots of speculation about what effect this may have on the jobs market. But until we do leave the EU and, further down the line, we're not going to know. But all I would say is keep going. Don't get it into your head that this is going to affect it, and go off and back that job that you want. Imran, hello. You said that you're struggling to keep your CV to 2 pages with all your experience, and you wondered how you can cut it down. It can be a problem for older workers, but there is a key word, which I mentioned earlier on, that everyone needs to keep in mind when doing their CV, and that's relevant. You don't need to tell them your whole life history and every single thing that you've done. You just need to tell them all the things that you've done and that are relevant to the job you're applying for.
I sort of usually advise people to have a master CV with everything they need to tell everybody and all of their jobs listed and, masses of information on. And then what you do is you adapt that to suit each job you're applying for. You really do need to tailor your CV. One size doesn't fit all. What bosses really want to know is what you've been doing recently. The skills that you've got that are recent and what experience you've got that's up to date. And stuff from the past could be out of date and it may not be relevant to today's job market, so that's a good way to sort of cut back on some things. Hi to Ian. Ian has been sacked from his last job and he wants to have include this on the CV. Sorry to hear this, Ian, but the basics is you cannot lie, but you don't need to actually write on your CV in words that you've been sacked. You simply need to put the dates of your employment. However, when it comes to interview, you could well be asked why you left your last job. You then need to decide how to handle this, and that's going to depend on the reason why you were sacked. Honesty is the best approach because the interviewer or your next potential boss will probably contact your old boss or somebody from your old firm, and they're going to find out the truth. And really, it's best that you tell it in your way rather than your potential boss hearing it from somebody else who may put an even bigger negative spin on it, which could be to your detriment. Hello to Mary. Mary wants to know if she should discuss salary in an interview. This question comes up a lot, Mary, and yes, you're right, it does feel uncomfortable, but it's obviously of interest to everybody. I would say no, don't ask. You're there to find out about the job, the employer, and to see if they like you like them, you think you can fit with the company. This is the people that comes in at a later stage when you're offered the job and you get the nitty-gritty terms and conditions, but it's not the best thing to ask at an interview. Hi to Caroline. Caroline wants to try something new after a few years out of work and she wants to know how to word her CV to show she's relevant. Caroline, this is going to depend on the roles you're applying for, what experience and skills you have to make you right for them. Like Imran earlier, keep the word relevant in mind when you're doing your CV and use recent examples of the skills and experience you've got, whether that's from jobs or voluntary work, travelling or social activities you've been involved in. Just to remind you again, everybody, that there's lots of help and resources on the Fish for Jobs website, CV, templates, tips, advice, all sorts of things, and up-to-date news and bits. So use all these things. They're free. They're there to help you in your job search and with any career progression. Sorry, can't get my words out. Hi to Simone. She says she's heard that employees aren't allowed to ask her age in interviews and wonders what to do if they do ask it. You're perfectly right, Simone. It is illegal for employees to ask your age. I'd say the best way to handle this is to do it in a sort of light-hearted way, but polite, and be very firm and say something along the lines of, we both know that you really shouldn't be asking that, and this will show that you know your rights in the workplace. They might just be trying it on, and you're on very strong ground if they do ask you this. Seema wants to know the best way to keep up with the latest jobs. Well, of course, Seema, the first place you should go to is Fish for Jobs and get on job alerts. And keep an eye on any of the job boards that are around. Check out websites of firms you may be interested in working with. And also, obviously, I'm going to promote my own jobs page each Thursday in the Daily Mirror, where I run a jobs board, which includes the jobs that Fish for Jobs have on there as well. But it's a nice little roundup of the jobs that we found that week. So there's lots of places, but I'd say your first and your most smart thing would be to sign up for Fish for Jobs, and then all the hard work's done for you there, really. Max is wondering what really sets him apart from younger workers. He's saying surely companies will want to hire younger people who they can pay less for. Well, yeah, this could be true, but you've got loads to set you apart, Max. Yeah, the proof that you can do the job, you can turn up on time, you can get out of bed every day, which some young people seem to struggle with when they first start work. You could deal with issues that arise, you don't panic, you can be left with responsibility, you take things in your stride, you don't have to have any hand-holding or expensive training, you've already got it. You're passionate, you've achieved great things, could be a false economy for businesses to take on someone younger who need possibly lots of expensive training, they may not be reliable, or at the end of all that, they may find out that they're actually capable of doing the job well, whereas you can already prove that you can do that. So don't be seeing your age, this is to everybody, really, don't be seeing your age as a barrier. You can play on it and it can be used to your advantage in lots of situations. And hi to Mira. She's thinking that she's a little too old to volunteer and wonders if firms would allow a 55-year-old plus to volunteer. Mira, they would love you to volunteer for them. go for it. Most charities and organisations are delighted to have anybody, and especially somebody who's got some good life experience and work experience like yourself. You could bring a lot to that role. It's a really good way also to get your foot back in the door for jobs. It's a good thing to have in the CV as well. Hi to Lynn. Lynn says she's got some relevant experience for a job she did about 30 years back. Wants to know if it's worth adding this onto her CV, but it would mean she'd go 2 pages. Lynn, if you change your jobs back to a sector you used to work in, then I'd mention it on your personal statement, spelling out like you want to get back into that area, whatever it is, or put it in your cover letter to highlight this experience. Because if you go back over 30 years, it will show your age, firstly, which you don't really want to reveal on your CV, and then it will mean lots of jobs that are totally irrelevant, possibly, to the job you're applying for, and really you do need to keep it to 2 pages. You can talk about this at the interview as well. Try and work on more recent examples of your skills and your experience. Linda wants to know if she should include her education history. She was at university 25 years ago. Basically, no, school and university leavers put their education on the CV because usually they haven't got a lot else to offer. That basically, they haven't got years work experience, they haven't got great achievements. Their education is always, the main thing they've got to offer. The best thing for older work is to include any recent professional qualifications, achievements, awards that you've got, but keep things recent and relevant. Up to date is what employers are looking for. Yes, they're interested in a bit of your past, but they don't really want to look back into the dark ages when potentially some of the stuff that you did is totally irrelevant to today's jobs market. And this is going to be my last question. I think we're running out of time. I'm terribly sorry to those who didn't get to, but we will come back to you on email. Hi, Nick. Nick said he's taken some time off work to look after his wife, and he's wondering how you should explain this absence from work. Nick, simply state on your CV that this is what you've done, that you've took time out to look after your wife. This is a perfectly plausible excuse for having a break from work. If while you've been doing this, you've updated any skills or you've kept your skills up to date, you've attended networking events, you've gone to any conferences, you've volunteered, you've got involved in any organisations, you may have, via being with your wife. Anything as a consequence of this that might be relevant to the job market today, and to show that you've kept up to date, that you are, you're on the ball with industry changes and any news in your industry. Use it to your advantage, and just show that you may not have been in the workplace for a little while, but you are still there and you're up to speed with everything that's going on. Anyway, thanks to everybody who's taken part in the webinar today. I hope you're feeling a bit more confident to tackle the jobs market.
Okay, so that's all we've got time for with the live Q&A. Thank you so much for submitting your questions. If we haven't managed to answer them today, we will come back to you via email. Okay, so quickly before we sign off, just to draw your attention to the resources in the resources tab below. We've got a whole host of CV, cover letter, interview and social media advice for mature job seekers. So please go and have a look and download any that you think might be helpful. And finally, we'd just both like to say a very big thank you for attending today.
Yeah, thank you guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you got lots of tips and information, and good luck with your job searching.
Thank you very much.